Cosmic Skeptic. I'm quite a skeptic myself in the fact that I like to question everything. But how much are you willing to question everything? I actually love the fact that you're very open to exploring new ideas, challenging people on their religions, and I applaud you for that, because I'm not a fan of religions either. Although I can say I'm not an atheist either, I come from more of a deist, Taoist philosophy point of view, as evident by the name of my channel, Nature is the Answer. But that does not discount the fact that I observe the world and apply reason to everything. I don't rely on faith, and I just simply do not deny that God may exist. And through different forms, of course, studying occultism and natural law and different forms of knowledge that have been kept hidden from humanity or is not generally known by those who are religious or scientific. That's why I figured to preface the video mentioning that, but that's just my own personal views. I want to actually challenge you on something that I think is more important than all of that. And it details really the biggest religion of all, and that is statism. Statism is the belief in human authority. And by authority, I mean the right to rule. And I've seen you go on Piers Morgan and challenge, the journalists there, saying, hey, we're worshiping the king and queen. It's like, what are we, still in the days of monarchy? This is insane. They don't have the right to rule over me. And I acknowledged the fact that you said that, and I was just amazed. I loved it.
I don't think it's a surprise that young people in this country are quite mystified by this bizarre relic of our Constitution that still relies on the notion that hereditary political office is a legitimate institution.
So you think
the problems of the monarchy predate these two individuals? I mean, there are plenty of ways to respond to what you were saying earlier, to engender national spirit and buttress the economy that don't involve subscription to a controversial hereditary dynasty, whose right to rule is still, if I might be allowed to remind you, officially legitimized by the authority of an Anglican God that doesn't exist. I'm sorry, I just can't take this seriously. I understand why they have to...
You're an atheist anti-monarchy.
I understand why they have to keep up with the crowns and the capes, because without these, who are these people? Nothing more than thinly
Well, I might say the same about you. I mean, who are you, an atheist anti-monarchist, to tell me how this country should be run?
Right. I think
Why do you have more rights?
The only qualification a person needs to criticise the head of state is citizenry. Within that state, I'd be quite concerned if you disagreed with that. I think that, look...
With what?
If you thought that you require more of a reason to criticise your head of state than just being supposedly a subject to that head of state. I mean, at the moment somebody claims the right to rule over me by birthright, I think I sort of automatically adopt the right to criticise them too. I'm not the one who requires...
Just to be clear, you'd rather be ruled by Boris Johnson?
I'm not the one who requires...
Would you rather be ruled by Boris Johnson?
I'd rather have an elected head of state, yes.
Yeah, like Boris Johnson or Liz Truss?
I'd much rather.
You can see the problem with elected heads of state. They're often complete...
Do you not see stability in the royal family in the sense that they have always been there and kind of, if they do continue, will always be there, whereas politicians kind of come and go.
Yeah.
Yes.
And politicians, are in 1 minute and then somebody does something and all of a sudden they're ousted. And also, it's typically, you'll always have kind of 50% of the country that dislikes any particular kind of head of state, and so aren't the figures just on paper for the royal family better than any politician in history?
Perhaps, but aren't you troubled by the incessant referral to these people as Highness and Majesty?
Fine. We could start by getting rid of these ridiculous garments. We spent most of the time that we've known
dressed
King
like
Charles
you?
dressed like me.
I mean,
and so to see him for the first time...
You're the king dressed like you. No offence.
Well, he'd probably put on a tie.
Huh?
He'd look more like you, I suppose.
Yes.
To see him suddenly put on these robes would be like watching Rishi Sunak or someone suddenly
but it's part of our history.
Ludicrous robes,
it gives us something so few other countries in the world have.
Nobody can take it seriously.
And you may not like
Nobody
it.
can take it seriously.
But many
You're in that age group that is apparently not as content with the monarchy. Where do you stand on that? Is that you and your peers?
It's not that we're not content, it's that we don't care. I mean, this has nothing to do with
why
our
don't
lives.
You care? Why don't, I mean, this is it's our constitution.
You're a journalist, you don't
care. The backbone of our system.
Doesn't that say something?
1 year on, that she is looking down on all of us tonight. Happy we're together, continuing to spotlight such an incredible community.
Looking down on us, that's an interesting choice of words.
Well, I've always felt...
That's pedantic, surely.
Yeah,
Come on.
that's nearly mad.
I'm just saying it's
a Turner phrase, Alex.
And it's an appropriate one, I think.
But we bow in corporate. We're bowing to the institution, not the individual.
But we don't.
It's the system we look at.
We don't
it's
bow
anachronistic.
in allegiance.
Lots of traditions. You can't necessarily justify. You're getting married. That's a bit of a whack.
We don't bow.
However, we kind of run with it. It sort of works.
We don't bow in allegiance to a quote liege lord who is apparently somebody with a right to rule over us
but do you shake
by
hands?
birthright.
Do you wear a tie? I mean, there's all sorts of ridiculous.
Members of Parliament bow, lower their heads towards the Speaker when they come in, and the mace.
No problem with that, especially because look.
Okay. Listen, there's nothing intrinsically more modern about a republic. When the republics became totally corrupt and useless in ancient Rome, they replaced them. What did they replace them with? A monarchy.
And what happens when the monarchy becomes corrupt? I don't think it's serious to suggest that this institution will still be around in 100, let alone 200
Don't worry about it. A lot of people who still live in that monarchy type of mindset, they're not going to see outside of it. Just as most people in America are not going to see outside their idea of a perfect republic set by their founding fathers with their holy scriptures they call laws. But that's the thing. Our religions function as governments, and our governments function as religions. The governments function as involuntary religions, and that's what makes them very, very much dangerous. And all throughout history, all those wars done by religions could not have been done without the use of the government. And Dr. Carl Jung says in his last book, The Undiscovered Self, many powerful revelations about religion, but in particular about how government, what he calls state slavery, is utilizing these religious techniques and manipulating the psychology of individuals so that to provide all the pleasures on earth, create the Garden of Eden for man by promising to create that. This is what the governments do, and they appeal to that motherly or fatherly instinct. You have the right, leaning side and the left leaning side. I want to be the caretaker. I want to be the protector. And you see this archetypal projection that is happening. And again, what he calls shadow work, it is evident when you start studying it. And you can come at this from a religious or non-religious point of view. There were many Christian anarchists. I talk about the abolitionists from the 1800s. A lot of them were religious, but they were arguing against slavery. How many people were pro-slavery and also religious? You can make that case, but I'm saying that there was a truth that they understood that was so fundamental that can't be disregarded that none of the historians were looking at. And that is they challenged the authority of the government itself. And this is something that has been detailed heavily through the works of Larken Rose. I want you to check him out because I think you'll love his work. Okay, now there's another group of people I want you to know about because I think they appeal to your message in particular concerning atheism and, questioning everything and using philosophy. That is Disenthrall, Patrick Smith. He's been in the movement for a while too. When I say movement, I mean people who are questioning, again, this belief system, statism. And, you can go back in history, you can look at Bakunin, you can look at Henry David Thoreau, you can look at all the different abolitionists and transcendentalists who were talking about this. You can go back to even Taoism. I talk about the philosophy side of it, not the religious side of it, where it talks about anarchism and sort of this idea that if we just let humans be free, there'll be order. If we try to create order in our effect to try to make order, it's actually going to cause chaos. And there's a lot of psychology behind this. You might be familiar with the Stanley Milgram experiments, and this particularly hits it on the nail because it confused scientists to the point where it was so controversial they don't want to have this experiment be done anymore. But it was humane. It was fake, the electric shocks done to people. It was fake shocks, but they were surprised to see that the everyday person was willing to shock their fellow man to the highest voltage just because an authority figure told them to do so. And there were a few individuals who said, I'm not going to go along with this because I know history. I know what it means to suppress my conscience and do what I'm told, and I'm not going to do it. I'm going to say no. And this is so fundamental. I'm surprised, not more atheists are challenging it. Now, there are many atheists who challenge it. Another one is Fabian Liberty. A lot of the anarcho-capitalists from that perspective understand statism in this belief system, though they come at it from a more economic point of view, and that's fine. If you're into sciences, you'd probably love that too, right? I come at it from the more moral perspective. I want to look specifically at the contradictions in people's own belief system. And I'm going to put some questions on the screen for you. And I'd be open to talk about this at all, in any length with you if you want, whether in private or publicly, talking about this belief system and even my experiences with it as well. I was heavily devoted into thinking America is the freest country on earth and we got this Constitution to protect us, and it's absurd. I'm surprised that we'd rather talk about sciences and religions that people can practice voluntarily than talk about an obvious evil where people know it is wrong to steal from someone, but they allow it to happen if it's done in the name of taxation. If it's done by other people to do it for them, but they want to go to their neighbors and steal their money themselves, how hypocritical. And when you really line up the logic for every single action and scenario, you'll realize just how absurd this mindset is, and how long we've had it for thousands of years, and how much of a shift and change in consciousness for everything will happen if you get to this root cause, the greatest religion of all. If you're against religion, why not talk about it? So this is my challenge to you, Cosmic Skeptic, okay? I really appreciate your work, and I'm on low sleep. I'm trying to get land and do stuff for growing food and show by example what could be done in this world with permaculture, another unique science that isn't often known. There's so many solutions and ideas that aren't talked about. And I think it's important somebody like you has a platform who is open-minded, who wants to challenge things, is open to learning information from people like me who are like sounding the alarms constantly, like, look at this. It's so apparent. Why aren't we looking at it? And there's a movie called The Jones Plantation that Larken Rose put out recently that goes into this mindset. And it's meant to be a psychological, type of film, but also comedic. And I think it was really well done, but there's nothing like that. Even the actors went on TV stations and they're like, this is like The Matrix. This is like V for Vendetta. This is not like anything that you think it is. This is not just a normal slavery movie. This is what's happening right now in America and the whole world.
My character, Mr. Smith in Jones Plantation, will make you question yourself. And so it's a psychological allegory, I would say, of a film. And so it uses the plantation, the Southern antebellum plantation home, as the backdrop of what we experience in America today. And so it's going to make you question a lot of things about what goes on around you, power structures, government, finances, and everything. So I think this is probably the deepest film that you've seen in 10 or 15 years. So deep like Matrix, deep like V for Vendetta, so it looks like, if people have seen the trailer, if you haven't, definitely check it out, but it comes off Django-ish or Pulp Fiction, right, but it's way deeper and much more different than what you expect.
Indeed. My main message is that government is slavery, and I can prove it by almost every single metric, okay? Without the government, you wouldn't have the chattel slavery and all these forms of institutionalized slavery, as they call it. You need an institution to make it possible to enforce it. And the government was always to the aid of the slave owners to make sure that those slaves would go back to that plantation. And, they really waged war on those abolitionists and called them crazy, made them, accused them of all sorts of things, censored them, just like nowadays when people get censored for challenging what's going on. So if we're truly skeptics, I think that we would support those who are getting censored, who are getting attacked, and at least be willing to hear them out and play devil's advocate. Thank you very much for watching. This is Corey Angelot. Nature is the answer. Be sure to reach out.